As the world of artificial intelligence continues to evolve, it's increasingly evident that the AI tools are rapidly changing the way we work in developer relations and community building. Tools like ChatGPT and GitHub CoPilot are transforming the landscape of our work by automating tedious tasks and repetitive work, providing valuable insights and analytics, and even helping generate content on our behalf. However, the integration of AI into our industry also raises new questions. Can AI truly enhance the work of our DevRel practitioners and allow us to focus on different challenges? Or will it end up diminishing our creativity and impact on supporting developers? How do we make sure AI is used ethically and responsibly? And what impact will it have on the future of not only DevRel, but software development in general? Join us as we explore the exciting world of AI in developer relations on this episode of the Community Pulse.
You're listening to the Community Pulse podcast. Welcome your host, Mary Thangval, Jason Hand, PJ Haggerty, and Wesley Faulkner.
Welcome back to another episode of the Community Pulse. Today, we're excited to speak with two amazing guests who have a ton of expertise to share with us today, Chris DeMars and Roselle Scarlett. Welcome to the show. Let's hear from each of you, starting with Roselle. Roselle, before we get started, could you please give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself?
Sure. Also, thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited. But yeah, my name is Roselle. I'm a junior developer advocate at GitHub. I've been here since September 2021 and super pumped and excited about Copilot. I always try to do advocacy for it because it's something that at first I was like, what is this? I'm not really into it. But then I really found the love for it and how it helped me. Before that, I was a software engineer for a bit. And yeah, that's me.
All right, Chris, tell us about yourself.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me. And I have to give a shout out to PJ, my homeboy in Buffalo, for asking me to be on this with y'all. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Chris. I'm a developer advocate lead at Split Software. Split is a feature management and experimentation platform. I've been there since September, and I talk about accessibility and CSS and started talking about feature flags and A/B testing and testing in production and all that fun stuff. So yeah, stoked to be here.
All right. Glad to have you both here.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very happy to have you both. Thank you.
I would like to start with our first question, which is kind of like level setting for people who aren't super familiar with tools like ChatGPT and Copilot. Let's go with you, Chris. Can you tell us a little bit about how these tools are used in DevRel and DevRel communities?
Yeah, so I think especially in the ChatGPT side, I have a writing background and I'm a published author. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been a published author. We can say, in quotes, published author. But even with my writing background, trying to come up with conference talks and titles, you might be super passionate about a topic. When I put a new talk together, I'm really passionate about it. I feel like people really need to know about this, or if people have a misconception about something that I'm passionate about, I want to be able to drop that knowledge on them. And a lot of the times I have trouble trying to come up with a good abstract, at least 4 sentences, right? And even with that writing background, it's hard to come up with something because you don't want to take too long writing an abstract, but you also don't want to just off the cuff, do it from whatever.
Yeah, they call it the burden of knowledge. You know too much about it, so it's hard to distill it into a
right. And you don't write the title before you write the abstract. So I found myself, because I saw somebody else do it, I was like, oh, this damn, ChatGPT can actually put together a really nice, intelligent sounding conference talk. Let me try this. So I did it. I said, I asked ChatGPT to give me 5 conference abstracts on technology A plus technology B. And it spit it out for me. And I read through them and I was like, oh, wow, these are really powerful. This is way better than the stuff I could write. And then I had it generate titles for those. And it was it's super clever because I'm really big into clever titles. And being a conference, being a conference organizer in the past and being on selection committees currently, Like I'm always looking for a catchy title, and it did that. I was like, oh, this is pretty sweet. So if you struggle with writing, I think ChatGPT can definitely help out in that sense when it comes to creating abstracts for conferences.
Right on. Rizal?
Yeah. I think AI tools are just having a really big impact in DevRel communities. And I say this because, like, okay, when I was a software engineer, I was like, wow, I would love to be a developer. Like, I still love it, but like, I had this different image of like what being a developer advocate would be. I'm like, I'll spend all my days just learning and teaching, and like, it's just going to be so fun. I'll have all this time to absorb all this knowledge and be able to create all this content. And even though I kind of do, I kind of don't have all that time because it's like I have to do like this podcast, and then right after this, I have to do a stream, and then people are
Are you
like,
complaining about being on this podcast?
"No,
Just checking.
I'm happy to be on this podcast." But I think I miss imagined or misenvisioned. I don't even know if that's a word, but I didn't envision like how busy it would be and like how less time I would have to really sit down and like how Chris was saying, like write an abstract or write a blog post or something like that, especially like when we're going from conference to conference. So I think like AI tools like these are really helpful in us like getting the work done faster and more efficiently, and then without us losing our creativity. Because sometimes when you're like, oh, I got to do this really quickly, you like kind of sometimes don't put in all the effort that you need to. So I'm not saying I'm mad at being on this podcast. I'm excited, but I want to be able to give my 100% at everything. And I can't because I'm one human. So I feel like AI tools have been helpful in like allowing me to be able to like give a little bit more, you know.
One of the things we were just talking about before we went live was if we, those are great examples of how the tooling, ChatGPT specifically is so great at just sort of unblocking us for certain creative tasks, just like Chris is describing. I've used it for similar stuff. Like I've been doing a lot of work in YouTube Shorts, and sometimes I'm just feeling less creative than usual. And it's I'm sort of when it comes to creativity, I enjoy working in groups and like brainstorming. And I feel like even though my team has often been busy and unable to sit down and have those creative sessions with me, I still have something I can now rely on to at least give me some options to think about, which has been a great experience. And I think, the obvious first use case that comes to mind for those creative experiences are blog post titles, tweets, things that, you're really trying to like win the attention of algorithms in SEO. And sometimes it's better to rely on a machine learning model to help you figure those things out. However, in just the little time that ChatGPT has been out there and been used, I've seen books now written with ChatGPT being, I'm sure a big contributor to the text that's in there. To Chris's point, it's now they're showing up in a lot of conference talk submissions. And I guess where I ultimately want to go with this is we can see the benefit as content creators trying to put some submissions out, CFPs and that kind of thing. But also me as a person who has, put on plenty of events and done a lot of reading of said submissions, we're now looking at a situation where we have just a lot more to go through to like figure out, are these talks, what we want in our program? Does this fit the content and the theme and everything else? And you used to go from like seeing 2 or 3 from a person being submitted, assuming that there's no limits, to now you can submit as many as you want. And it's just creating this picture, I think, where a lot of conference organizers are a little bit stuck on what to do with this. We'd love to hear more. And, maybe sometimes it is just the matter of language and how it's described in the abstract, or a catchy title, like Chris said, like that goes a long way. I have used very catchy titles specifically to catch the eyes of the CFP people that are reading it. So let's start with Rizal. I would love to hear your thoughts on, is this a problem for our industry, where we now are just creating so much content, it's hard to get through all of it? And so let's just start with that.
Wait, can I clarify on your question? Are you saying um, is Chat GPT harming all the content that we're putting out, or are you saying, or do we have too much content on our plate? Just want to make sure.
I think from my perspective is if I'm now going to be reading a lot of submissions, should I put some limits on either I don't want any of them to be submitted with ChatGPT's assistance, or now do I just have to put a numerical limit on how many submissions I take, I guess.
Gotcha.
I don't, in my opinion, it's not, ChatGPT is great. I love using it, but I also recognize that we can now put out X in whatever variable you want content at a much faster clip, which still at the end of the day requires humans to consume. And it just seems like it's creating an off balance situation.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I got clarity. I just didn't want to start rambling on a completely different topic.
You're free to do that as well.
But I think with these AI tools, there needs to be a certain amount of balance. I've never been a conference organizer, so I don't know. And even without ChatGPT, I push the limit of, so sorry, conference organizers. If you say I could submit 10 talks, I'm submitting all 10 and hoping you pick one of them, which probably is not the best practice. So sorry. But even without like ChatGPT and stuff like that, I was already doing that. But I do think, and even when I talk about Copilot, there needs to be a balance of like how much you're inserting yourself in there and then how much you're using the tool. Because for example, you can just use Copilot and keep tabbing and keep letting it auto suggest things to you, but sometimes it might not be completely correct. So you can't completely rely on that. You want to make sure you're double checking what it's suggesting. You still have to use your own logic and knowledge to actually make sure it works and make sure it's doing the right flow that you want and it's not introducing any like vulnerabilities. Same thing with ChatGPT. I don't really use it. Like everyone's like, they use it to write all these blog posts and stuff like that. I've used like Copilot and ChatGPT to write blog posts before, and I've noticed that like less people want to read them. Like I feel really strong in my writing skill, and I really like my writing style, and I think other people do too. So I think that when I rely too heavily on AI tools, it removes my voice and the way I would present things. So I think it's good in like idea generation and leading me in the right direction, but not for it to completely remove like who I am and what I bring to the table as a developer advocate. Because we always talk about DevRel is about authenticity and stuff like that. If we're just relying on these AI tools, it takes away that authenticity. So maybe as a conference organizer, yeah, maybe we should say like some kind of limitations. Like, yeah, you can use ChatGPT for like idea generation or helping you with your title, but don't rely too heavily, like just to, like a little warning, don't rely too heavily on it for the abstract and stuff like that. I don't know, I'm not a conference organizer. So
this is great. Chris, what about you? Got any thoughts on if you put on your event organizer hat, who has to look through all these submissions now?
Yeah, I think this could go, I would say that there could be like a couple disadvantages to this, right? One being, like Roselle was saying, like if you're going to accept a bunch of CFPs, I'm going to submit everything I have, and hopefully one of those gets picked. Now, not all of them are going to be written in Chat GPT, but still, like if you don't put a cap on it, then that's a lot of content to go through. I think it would make sense for conferences, especially now with Chat GPT, maybe putting a limit, like you can only submit 3 or you can only submit 5, because then that will bring that down. But also, I could see it as a disadvantage to people that are submitting talks that don't use Chat GPT, that are writing it on their own, because now you got a handful of these talks that are probably amazing and they sound amazing because they're written with AI, and then you have all these other talks that are written, off the brain, and it might sway conference organizers one way or the other, picking talks that are only written, like the abstracts are only coming from Chat GPT, opposed to somebody that's just writing them with the knowledge of writing that they have. So I could see the disadvantages of both ways, but then also, conference organizers could say, listen, if you are submitting a talk with Chat GPT, we're not going to accept it, and we'll be able to tell. Like there's a clear distinction between something I would have written myself and something ChatGPT could have written, because then you get that voice, like Rizal was saying. Your voice comes through in your abstract. Your style, the way you talk, is going to be translated into words. So conference organizers could do that too. So I could see a handful of different disadvantages with it, which I've never actually thought of prior to this conversation.
That's amazing. I mean, we're all trying to learn and we're thinking through this because we're all figuring it out. It's very, very new. And I think the conversation, at least the context of it, has been a lot about, as DevRel professionals, how we use it to do our job, to kind of eliminate some of the steps to make things easier. I'm wondering, from the content consumption end, like end users, how do you feel that we can use these tools for maybe efficiently, like choosing to make content more accessible for people trying to understand something? For instance, I know, like, if you're able to say, like, show me a video on how to use, I don't know, Ruby on Rails or Go in the style that I like to learn, or I know that a lot of search engines are going to be incorporating it and say, tell me the top 3 ways of doing certain X and Y and Z. GPT and other tools like that, and using AI, will at least give me a way to consume and learn in a way that is, I would say, conducive to the way that works better for me. Do you feel that in your roles of a way to making that or exposing that type of interface to help people kind of consume whatever content that you're creating as well? And we ended with Chris, so let's start with Rizal.
Oh, dang it. I was like, let Chris go first. Okay, let's see. So we're saying, from the consumption end, how do we use AI to make things more accessible for other people?
Yeah, like building it into your docs.
Yeah.
So that, sometimes you want code snippets. Sometimes you want an exhaustive, like before a recipe, where the russet potatoes were like raised and grown and why they have developed over time before you get to the recipe. Some people like that. Some people just want the recipe. So, like, do you feel that there's an opportunity to incorporate that stuff into a way that people can now, like, choose to consume content?
Yeah, actually, now that you bring up the doc stuff, I've seen that the Astro team, who like created this framework called Astro, basically they developed an AI, or an AI tool called Houston AI. And basically what happens is, like, you type in the chat of Houston AI and you ask it questions about Astro, and it searches through the documentation and helps like return like solutions for people. And I think that's such an amazing thing, because especially when I was like learning to code back in 2018, documentation looked really scary to me and confusing. So why not have an option for it to be more conversational, where you're like, hey, how do you do this with Astro? Like, how do you handle front matter and stuff like that? Rather than like reading through these documentation, it'll return like the results to you in a more conversational way. So I do think there's more opportunities for other projects to do something similar and make like reading documentation more accessible for folks. But that's like the one example I could think of. I'm not sure of others.
That's awesome. I mean, and you even said the word read documentation. So it'd be nice if it is text to speech and gives audio prompts for those who may have visual impairments. So this is definitely could be a way of accessing something in a different format.
Yeah.
So
wait, and I would be remiss, sorry to interrupt you, to not mention, hey, GitHub. Like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but CoPilot has like a voice activated like version where like you can be like, hey, GitHub, type this out for me. And now we've updated even more, where it could be more conversational. You could type in the little hey GitHub thing and be like, hey, can you help me figure out how to do this? Or you can speak it out to hey GitHub. So that's also another option.
That's amazing. What about you, Chris? How do you see any ways that this could make it easier for user to consume technical content?
Yeah. So coming from the accessibility space, I think that's really good. So like our help docs at Split, really robust, a lot of great information there. But any docs, like anything, like if you can type in a search bar, you know, help me find this or give me like a code snippet for that. The one thing you don't want to do is make your user think, right? And your user is going to be the developer or anybody that's just reading the docs, right? And the accessibility piece of that too is like, I don't know about you, but if I'm trying to look for something in a doc space, I get really like my anxiety gets a little higher if I can't find what I'm looking for. I get frustrated and I don't understand something, and then I'll get distracted, and then the ADHD piece will kind of fall into that. We want to try to eliminate all of that stuff because when we talk about accessibility, we're not just talking about visual, hearing, mobility, cognitive, and temporary. We're also talking about hidden impairments. And a lot of times that's overlooked. And two big pieces of that are anxiety and ADHD. And if we can eliminate that when it comes to searching and reading, and then like the docs space, I think that's extremely powerful. And I think that should be baked into more docs across all different types of organizations and products and projects.
Yeah, it'll keep you from going to a forum and someone calling you stupid. If you know it's an automated support system, then you can kind of reduce your anxiety knowing that someone's not going to say, you should have known this already, or, oh, you're a noob. So yeah, that's definitely a really good point.
I know for me, much to what everybody's already saying, like docs sometimes are just scary. You go look at them and you're like, where do I start? And my eyes dart to the biggest, boldest text first. So even though like somebody went to a lot of effort to put in a really great intro or summary of like what I'm about to find in this doc, I almost immediately find myself halfway down the page. And that's just the way my brain works when I go to read. So then I find myself skimming and scrolling and not finding exactly what I want, as quickly as I can. So I think this is a great use case where we can start looking at the consumption of our technical documentation and retrieving that documentation in different ways. I know CoPilot does some interesting things around that as well, like suggesting some different code snippets or whatever. ChatGPT does the same thing, and it'll even tell you, like, try to explain the code to you. Here's what this is going to do, which I think also helps. And docs in general, they go stale, and I think that's another area too that maybe this could help. Is it takes some effort for a person to go back and review docs, from even a year ago, and make sure that the screenshots on here still current, because we're always changing the UI. Like, there's just, docs are hard to stay fresh. And I think anybody who's been around DevRel and been involved in technical documentation, creating it and reading it, have run into frustration with docs. Another area I kind of want to pivot to and talk about before we run out of time is this idea of metrics. Anybody in DevRel has had lots of conversations. How do we show our impact? What are we doing? Is it working? All those types of things. And aside, I don't want to get into the merits of what metrics are good and what aren't valuable within our industry. But one of the first use cases I had with ChatGPT was to report out on a project that I'm doing. And that required me, doing some collecting of different numbers and crunching some numbers and then putting that into a summary and sending that out in an email. And I will say ChatGPT cut the time into a fraction of what it normally would take me to do that. And a lot of that was nothing more than copying and pasting some data out of cells and asking it to tell me, what does this mean? How can I explain this to my team in a simpler way that makes sense? I'm wondering, have either of you thought about this side of the conversation? ChatGPT, of course, is just one, but there's a lot of AI tools out there that are trying to sort of shortcut some of the things that we either don't like doing, it's not our strength, or it's just difficult in general. Sharing numbers and metrics is hard. I'm wondering we'll start with Chris this time, what we should be thinking about within AI, and how can we help it tell our story and be advocates for us and to share what's going on within our communities. Chris.
I've never even thought about doing that. So whatever strategy you're using, hook that up to your boy, because I need to figure that out too. Because I'm using Orbit and just trying to pull from a bunch of places that I can't track with the orbit plan that we're using, right? So yeah, I mean, I like that. Like if you could just give ChatGPT all these numbers and say, put this metrics report together for me, whatever, and be able to take that, consume that for yourself, and then hand that out. Like that's to me, that's super powerful because that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, right? Because now you're not having to go through tool A and tool B and then like search for Twitter spaces that you did just to get the insights and the metrics on those, and that can be a pain. Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. It sounds slick. It sounds like a slick move. So you need to hook your boy up with your process for that.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend putting anything into into anybody else's tools that might not need to go there. You know, any of the numbers that I'm sharing are basically public numbers. There's nothing under NDA type of thing. So I don't want to advocate for publishing your metrics into somebody else's system. But Roselle, what about you? What are your thoughts on how can AI help us share the story of what's going on?
I'm gonna echo Chris. I didn't even consider this as an option, but it sounds amazing. Like I would love to use AI to help me better track my metrics because I don't even really know what I'm doing with my metrics. I'm just like, cool, people viewed it. I think it's going good. So yeah.
This has been a great conversation, and I just want to take a quick temperature check before we move to our checkouts. And so, just really quickly, we've talked about ChatGPT, we've talked about AI, we've talked about using it as a tool, we talked about assisting people, we've talked about even like giving us tools to help our job, but we've also been talking about consuming it, but not it be consumed by it. So how would you feel? I mean, we all do a lot of public facing work. How would you feel if you are part of the training set, you're part of the training data, and someone else is using things that were derived from your work? Just temperature check quickly. Roselle, what do you think? How would you feel?
I feel okay with it. I don't know. My perspective is like I'm in open source and I want to share my knowledge with people. And part of sharing my knowledge with people is them seeing my work. That's how I learned from people is like I looked at their talks or their abstracts and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's how they do it. I'm going to kind of copy until I find my own style. So I'm okay with it.
That's awesome. What about you, Chris? What if someone submits an abstract that looks like you wrote it?
Ooh, so now you're getting into a whole other world of mine. So I'm cool with it. That's fine and dandy, but I'm very much into the paranormal, ufology, and cryptozoology world too, right? And so there's always talks about other people living your life in like a different dimension. And I saw a meme the other day, and trigger warning, this might be a little dark, but not, it probably isn't a little dark or dark at all. If like when we pass onto the world, the next world, wherever that is, but it's actually just somebody taking off the VR set and saying, how was that? And the person taking off is like, wow, that was awesome. And they might have only been doing it for like 2 hours, right? But they lived your life that whole entire time, right? And now they can take that and move on with everything that they've learned from you. So you're getting into like a very weird space. And weird is a compliment. If you do the etymology of the word weird, it's actually a compliment. I love being told I'm weird. It's a compliment to me. You're getting into a whole other dimensional category, and I'm fully on board. Let's rock and roll with it.
So I just want to make a quick comment on that. I guess anything. Well, Roselle, do you have anything else that you want to add on this one? Okay, before I jump in here, great. So Wes and I have talked about this a number of times because as we were planning this episode, and this is one big part of it. I know. I've been in and adjacent around the AI sort of space now for a few years in a lot of my previous projects, and it always comes up about being, responsible and ethical with our AI practices and what we're doing. And I think this kind of speaks to the heart of that. A lot of us want to make sure that we're doing right by everybody else with a lot of this stuff. And some of it is, I think, gets a little bit personal when we do put our content out there under the badge of our company. That's one thing. When we put stuff out there under just our own persona and our own personal, world experiences, DevRel experiences, whatever you want us to talk about, it does raise these questions of, is this content mine? Is it somebody else's? Is it just like you said, Rizal? I've never thought of it that way, but I do think I'm an open source human being. Like I wouldn't be doing things like this show and wouldn't be in this industry at all if I wasn't really just driven on helping and putting out as much information as I can. Tearing down all the walls and removing the gatekeepers, and let's all just sort through this together. I don't necessarily have a problem with the natural language models pulling in my content, my ideas. Now, the one thing I have thought about, though, is I think there's a difference between putting out things that is more of an opinion of mine. A lot of the things we talk about on here will get into more of opinion rather than just objective reality. But I think when it comes to like sharing content about how I built something, if there's architectural designs or I've just built some piece of software somewhere somehow, and I've showed people how I did that, there's not a lot of opinion in there. I might have some thoughts about why I made certain architectural decisions, but at the end of the day, I put that out there, expecting people to do something with it. And I think if these new tools make it easier for that material to be consumed or found and used, then that's to all of our advantages. And so let the machines have it, as far as I'm concerned. That's sort of the point of this position in general. So as long as they're not twisting the truth and leading people astray and making people make bad decisions that harm others, I think that's kind of the main thing we have to watch for.
Yeah.
Plus one.
Yeah. And I like how you brought up being like responsible AI, because I do see how it could affect other creators differently. Like artists, they're not necessarily putting out their art for people to learn like we are. They're putting it out to like make sales and stuff like that. So I can see how it's harmful and how AI creators should be more careful with that type of stuff. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, we are just about out of time for this episode. I feel like we're just scratching the surface on this subject. So I appreciate both of you being here, Rizal and Chris, to share your experience. I feel, we're gonna have to get you back on soon and do some more talking about these things. So, but why don't we switch gears here and start talking about some of the checkouts? We do this at the end of every episode where we have a little bit of time baked in to just share some of the things that are on our top of mind, both as hosts and guests of the show, within the realm of the podcast. So some things might be related to AI, some things might not. So why don't we just go around and starting with Rizal, you want to share with our audience anything that's top of mind that you'd like to put out there?
Yeah. First, I want to share this stream that James Q. Quick was hosting. He was featuring Corey Weathers, and they were talking about developer relations for Black developers. I thought it was an interesting topic. I didn't even consider the fact that maybe DevRel is done differently for Black developers, or that we should. So definitely check that out. I thought it was a good conversation. I almost didn't show up to this podcast because it got me. And then also there's this book called Finding Me by Viola Davis. I'm not super into like books written by celebrities, but it's really well written, really deep, and it really shows her growth from like how she started out, like being poor, even like living with rats and stuff like that, and then eventually like getting what her dream was. And then also I made a Discord recently for Black professionals in DevRel, or people or Black folks looking to get into DevRel. So definitely check that out if you're Black. And
How about Chris? What about you? You want to share some things with us?
Yeah, I got a couple things. So I wanted to share a article, and you can definitely just, if you go to Split's website, split.io/blog, you can find it there. It is called 3 Ways Feature Flags Could Have Saved Jurassic Park. If you are a Jurassic Park fan or a Jurassic World fan, I love the whole entire franchise, except for JP3. That was kind of meh. But it's a great article written by our director of demand gen, Elizabeth George at Split. Really, really cool article on feature flags and how it could have saved Jurassic Park. So if you're a fan of JP, you'll definitely dig that article. And then I'm also going to be on the road here in the next couple months. So if anybody wants to come hang out and kick it, go to a talk, I'm actually speaking at a local meetup here in Michigan in a couple weeks in Southfield, but I'll also be at Orlando Code Camp in March. I will be at Dev Nexus in Atlanta, Georgia in April. And in May, I'm going to be speaking at Chain React in Portland, Oregon. So come hang out if you can.
Excellent. All right. Wes, let's hear yours.
So, of course, as a lot of people are, especially in our space, have transitioned over to Mastodon, and that moves into figuring out what you can and can't do there, but also what tools you have available to kind of use Mastodon and make it easier to interact with people. And so I've tried different tools here and there. I've tried Toot. There's Ice Cubes. There's out there. There's a lot of different tools. One that I like that is web-based is Elk. So there's Elk Alpha. They're just still developing it, and it takes kind of like the web interface for Mastodon, but makes it prettier, and it feels a little bit easier to use and more approachable than using the default Mastodon web client, because I think a lot of people experience Mastodon differently when they move to a mobile client, but this is a little bit different, but experiencing Mastodon using a different web client. So if you go to elk.zone, you can now use your login for any server you're on and see this new kind of interface. And they also make a PWA version of it, so you can actually use it on mobile as a mobile application. So I like that type of experimentation and usage of Mastodon for those who are just relatively new to it and want to try different ways of experiencing it. The other thing is more on topic, on brand for this episode, is the ChatGPT cheat sheet. And I think we've heard of ChatGPT used to write abstracts, and we also used it to do code snippets. I've used it for Excel formulas and creation, but you can also use it for like putting words into tables or doing sentiment analysis. So there's different ways that you can use ChatGPT that may not be immediately apparent because you have just a prompt. And so this ChatGPT cheat sheet is really great to just kind of explore the different ways that you could use it. So those are my two picks.
Awesome. Great stuff. Great stuff, everybody. And yeah, I got a few things I want to share too. But first, let me just say, because I just want to, this has been so great to talk to both of you, Chris and Roselle. Thank you for being here. Obviously, this is a very topical, current topic, I guess. Everybody seems to be talking about falling over ChatGPT these days. But also GitHub CoPilot, I think, is really rad too. And we didn't spend nearly enough time talking about that. One of the links I'm going to share in the resources, you just go to the website to grab it, is this article I thought that was really good, titled 8 Things You Didn't Know You Could Do with GitHub Copilot. I think,
the blog post I wrote, sorry.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it might be. It was a couple of weeks ago when I read through it, and I threw it in my notes, and then I haven't pulled it back up since then until today. But I remembered it being one of the best ones I had seen. So anyway, thank you for that. The other piece, reading material I want to share, is not related to AI. It's just something I've been reading on my own. It's called Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. I think this book is just a great read in general for everybody. It's always important to understand our own attachment styles and how those play roles in our relationships, and including our work relationships and all of them. So I'm a sucker for science explaining why I am the way I am in lots of ways, and so this is one of those that I wanted to put out there. The other thing, I've got another number of other articles. I won't go through them all, but they will be in the show notes or in our blog post that goes out with the recording. But I did also, lastly, want to just mention that there's an event coming up for anybody who might be in the Denver, Boulder area or Front Range of Colorado. That's where I am. Called the Learning from Incidents Conference. That'll take place, I believe it's the 15th and 16th of next week from when we're recording right now. So February 15th and 16th, Wednesday and Thursday. Tickets are still available. I am not sure if I will be there. I unfortunately suffered an ankle injury this week and will be undergoing surgery next week. So the timing is bad for me to be there. But a lot of my friends are going to be there, so I'm kind of torn on whether or not I can try to go right before surgery. We shall see. With that, Wesley, I want to hand it back to you to take us from here.
Now, I know we're missing PJ from this episode and, of course, Mary, but usually we end with a quote that PJ supplies and reads that is usually from a rap lyric. And I thought because of the subject matter of what we're talking about, that and, of course, the timing, we should keep in mind the ethics and the things that we're trying to do as we explore these new tools and how we can make them more accessible to all types of people. So my quote is, we have before us the glorious opportunity to inject a new dimension of love into our veins of our civilization, which I think is something that we can think about when we're using these tools. And that quote is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It being Black History Month, I thought it would more be appropriate. I'd like to thank our guests for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience. And I want to invite anyone who has feedback about ChatGPT and how it's changing your career to tell us and let us know, and we'll incorporate it. Until next time, thank you for joining us here at the Community Pulse, and we'll see you next month.
You've been listening to the Community Pulse. Find out more at communitypulse.io, on Twitter at community_pulse, or anywhere you get your favorite podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, check out our extra podcast, The After Pulse. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the